When Cancer awakens all their power, the universe trembles not from fear, but from awe at the beauty of their transformation. The sign of Cancer, so often misunderstood or underestimated, holds within its depths an immense reservoir of strength, resilience, and spiritual fire. It is a power born not of dominance, but of divine nurturing, not of conquest, but of sacred protection. When Cancer finally steps fully into its purpose, there is no turning back. The tides change. The moon speaks louder. The soul of Cancer shines with a radiance that cannot be dimmed by the shadows of the past. This awakening does not come suddenly. It emerges like the moonlight over still waters, gently at first, then with a growing certainty. Cancer's power is forged in the crucible of emotional trials, in the silence of long nights spent in reflection, in the quiet endurance of pain held in the heart without complaint. Every tear shed becomes a sacred river leading them home. Every heartbreak becomes a portal of remembrance. Every betrayal once endured becomes a blade they melt down into gold. When Cancer stops fearing the intensity of their feelings, and instead embraces them as holy instruments of truth, they begin to walk with a sovereignty that no one can take from them. This power does not seek permission. It arises organically, like the ocean responding to the call of the moon. Cancer's intuition sharpens. They begin to see not only what is, but what lies beneath. They no longer doubt their inner voice. They recognize it as the compass of the divine feminine or sacred inner masculine, depending on what force they carry forward. They listen to the whispers of their soul and move accordingly, no longer asking others to validate their direction. They trust the pull of the tide inside them. Their protective instinct becomes a gift of monumental force. They become the shield for the vulnerable, the voice for the silent, the mother for the orphaned dreams of others. They no longer fear their sensitivity, for they know it is the source of their superhuman empathy and perception. They can read a room without a word. They can feel a lie in their bones. They detect dishonor in a heartbeat. And instead of shrinking from this awareness, they wield it as a form of spiritual leadership. They become the guardians of energy, choosing carefully what enters their world, curating their sacred spaces like temples of healing. When Cancer awakens, they step into emotional mastery. This does not mean they become emotionless or cold. It means they learn how to ride their inner waves without being consumed by the storm. They hold space for themselves with grace, allowing their moods to flow like tides, but no longer being drowned by them. Their emotional literacy becomes legendary. Others come to them not just for comfort, but for wisdom, because Cancer has been to the depths of the soul and returned with the map. They begin to understand the magnitude of their role in the collective. As a cardinal water sign ruled by the moon, Cancer is here to initiate emotional healing on a vast scale. When they awaken to this, their life becomes a sanctuary of rebirth. Their presence alone begins to recalibrate those around them. Their energy becomes a balm, but also a flame. They offer shelter and fire in equal measure. They can wrap someone in tenderness, and the next moment set boundaries as fierce as a warrior defending sacred ground. They remember that love is not always soft. It is also strong, discerning, and willing to walk away from anything that dishonors the soul. This power that Cancer carries is deeply ancestral. It echoes with the wisdom of those who came before. Their blood remembers. Their bones remember. Their dreams are threaded with messages from beyond the veil. When they stop silencing their inner voice to make others comfortable, they awaken the oracle within. They begin to channel truth, love, and vision. They remember that they are not merely a child of the moon. They are a mirror of the moon itself, reflecting light in darkness, shifting with divine rhythm, shaping the ocean of collective consciousness with every movement. Cancer's power is never ego-driven. It is soul-led. It comes from the sacred realization that their emotional depth is not a weakness, but a divine language. That their ability to care deeply is not a burden, but a superpower. That their instinct to protect, nourish, and love is the force that keeps families, communities, and even nations alive. When they own this truth, they stop apologizing for who they are. They stop waiting to be chosen, and they choose themselves. They stop hiding behind their shell and begin to wield it as armor and symbol of sacred identity. The world needs the awakened Cancer, the mystic, the healer, the protector, the heart warrior. They are not here to fit into a mold, but to melt it and reshape it into something more compassionate, more whole, more alive. And when they rise, they inspire others to do the same. They awaken the sleeping hearts of those around them. They ignite the lost dreams in others. They become a lighthouse to the wounded, a fierce storm to the unjust, and a tide of love that nothing can resist. Cancer's power is lunar, fluid, magnetic. It cannot be boxed or predicted. It must be felt, honored, and revered. When it is fully awakened, it becomes a cosmic force that nourishes life, rebirths hope, and transforms pain into poetry. And in that sacred fire of emotional alchemy, Cancer finds not only their purpose, but their ultimate freedom. When Cancer awakens all their power, they become a living embodiment of the sacred union between intuition and purpose. Their journey has never been about surface strength or outward dominance. It has always been about depth, connection, and inner sovereignty. Cancer, ruled by the moon and born under the sign of cardinal water, carries the codes of ancient wisdom in their emotional body. These codes awaken when they choose to no longer hide from their own truth, when they stop apologizing for their sensitivity, and when they begin to view their emotions not as obstacles, but as divine instruments of transformation and creation. The emotional landscape of Cancer is not a weakness. It is a cosmos of truth, a map of empathy, a wellspring of healing. When Cancer fully embraces this, when they allow the waves of their emotions to guide rather than hinder them, they rise. They rise with the force of the moon commanding the tides, gentle yet irresistible. Their feelings, once a source of confusion or self-doubt, become the very foundation of their wisdom. In them lives the ability to understand what others cannot say, to comfort without needing words, and to see what is invisible to most. This perception is their gift and their compass, and once awakened, it cannot be ignored. Their protective instincts become sacred. Cancer stops wasting energy trying to shield everyone from everything and starts discerning who is truly deserving of their nurturing power. They no longer exhaust themselves trying to prove their worth through overgiving. Instead, they embody the truth that love is not self-sacrifice. It is the divine act of choosing oneself while radiating warmth to those aligned with their spirit. They become the sovereign guardian of their own inner sanctuary, allowing only what nourishes their peace to enter. And in this act of choosing themselves, they teach others how to rise. Their voice grows stronger. No longer silenced by fear of rejection or misunderstanding, Cancer speaks with the clarity of someone who knows what it means to feel deeply and survive. They become storytellers, channels, spiritual leaders, and emotional architects. They create spaces where others can safely return to themselves. Through their awakened presence, they build bridges between the past and future, between the soul and the body, between truth and love. Their compassion becomes their revolution. Their kindness becomes a silent force that shifts timelines and heals generations. Cancer carries the essence of the divine mother or father, not through traditional gender roles, but through a cosmic archetype of unconditional presence. They hold space not only for others, but for themselves. They begin to listen inward, and the silence reveals everything. The ancestors speak. The dreams become more vivid. The inner child no longer needs to cry out in pain, because Cancer learns to reparent themselves with grace, with gentleness, with strength. They become whole within, and in that wholeness they find clarity. They do not seek to compete, they seek to create. They do not conquer with force, but with love so unwavering that it transforms even the most barren emotional landscapes into blooming gardens. Their home becomes not just a place, but an extension of their soul, filled with energy that heals, restores, and inspires. Wherever they go, they carry this sacred space within them. They are the hearth, the water, the lullaby in the dark, and the tidal wave that clears what no longer serves. Their moods, once seen as instability, are revealed to be a lunar rhythm, each phase meaningful, each emotion a message, each cycle sacred. As they awaken, Cancer begins to honor their cyclical nature. They no longer fight against the ebb and flow of their energy. They learn when to retreat and when to rise, when to speak and when to simply feel. They walk in alignment with cosmic timing, not human expectation. And because of this, they become unstoppable, not in the way that burns out, but in the way that endures. Their resilience is not loud, but unbreakable. It was built in the dark, in solitude, in silence. It was built every time they chose to keep going despite not being understood. Their love is not conditional. When Cancer awakens, they love with the purity of someone who has learned to love themselves first. They no longer chase after people who drain them. They no longer romanticize pain or martyrdom. They create bonds rooted in mutual care and soul recognition. Their relationships become portals of growth, not cages of obligation. They teach others that love can be both soft and firm, that holding someone accountable can also be an act of love, and that true intimacy begins with emotional honesty. The awakened Cancer does not fear their darkness. They walk through their shadows with reverence, knowing that healing is not linear, and that wholeness includes every part of their being. Their vulnerability becomes their strength. Their scars become symbols of their capacity to transform. They embody emotional leadership not as a performance but as a truth. They can guide others through storms because they have weathered many of their own. They become a lighthouse not because they have all the answers, but because they are no longer afraid of their own depth. Cancer's intuition sharpens to the point of spiritual vision. They sense what is coming. They trust their gut. They make choices that seem irrational to others, yet always lead them closer to their divine path. They become alchemists of emotion, transmuting grief into art, sorrow into wisdom, and loneliness into sacred solitude. They no longer run from discomfort because they know it is the birthplace of transformation. Their relationship with the moon deepens. They feel her phases as their own. They work with her energy, not against it. They become aware of how to use their emotional tides to nourish creativity, to manifest intention, to rest when needed, and to act when the current calls. The moon becomes not just a symbol, but a guide, an eternal reminder that there is beauty in the darkness and strength in the unseen. Cancer, when fully awakened, becomes a force of emotional evolution. They change lives by simply being present, by listening deeply, by existing in a state of radical authenticity. They are no longer ruled by fear, guilt, or the opinions of others. They are ruled by love, spirit, and the truth of who they are. And in this state, their power becomes a living, breathing miracle. They are not here to be small. They are not here to carry the world's pain in silence. They are here to embody sacred love, fierce protection, and the healing light of emotional truth. When they awaken, nothing can stop them. They move with divine intention. They love with infinite depth. They lead with heart and vision. They do not need validation, for their soul knows its purpose. And as they rise, the world remembers how to feel again. When Cancer awakens completely, there is a subtle yet undeniable shift not only within them but in the vibrational field surrounding them. They become a cosmic transmitter of lunar intelligence, channeling the mysteries of the moon into lived, embodied wisdom. There is a radiance that flows from them, calm, magnetic, and quietly commanding. This is not a light that demands attention through noise or spectacle. It is the kind of light that others feel in their soul long before they understand it with their mind. It is ancient, familiar, and healing. The Cancerian journey is intimately linked to the concept of energetic sovereignty. When Cancer finally awakens to their full potential, they cease to absorb the wounds of others as if they were their own. They become aware of their energetic boundaries and begin to wield them not as walls of defense but as temples of discernment. They realize they can still hold space for others without diminishing their own light. They learn that being emotionally available does not mean becoming emotionally entangled. Their compassion becomes refined, not diluted. One of the most powerful aspects of Cancer's awakened state is their relationship to memory. Cancer rules memory, heritage, emotional history, and ancestral legacy. When awakened, Cancer begins to understand the sacred responsibility of memory, not as something to remain trapped in, but as something to honor, heal, and transform. They no longer carry generational wounds unconsciously. Instead, they rise as the alchemical vessel through which ancestral pain is transmuted into ancestral power. Through them, lineages are mended. Through them, old stories are rewritten. They realize that remembering is not only about looking back, but also about reclaiming the wisdom that was buried beneath pain. Awakened Cancer becomes the master of emotional time travel. They visit the past not to dwell, but to retrieve lost fragments of the self. They sit with the inner child, not out of nostalgia, but as an act of soul restoration. They become architects of new emotional futures, understanding that what they feel in the present has the power to shape timelines. They begin to consciously co-create emotional realities that nourish rather than deplete, uplift rather than wound. Their inner world becomes a sanctuary of renewal. Another aspect that comes online as Cancer awakens is their capacity for emotional leadership within communities. They are no longer content to remain behind the scenes. They emerge as emotional visionaries, able to see the soul needs of a group, a family, or an entire generation. They become emotional architects who know how to create environments that foster authenticity, safety, and truth. Their homes, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, become centers of gravity for healing and evolution. Their leadership does not demand loyalty. It naturally inspires trust. In this state, Cancer's creativity reaches new heights. Their imagination becomes a fertile ground where beauty is born from emotion. Art, music, storytelling, caregiving, teaching, whatever path they choose becomes infused with deep feeling and sacred intention. Their work is not a product but a transmission. Their creations carry frequencies of healing. They become vessels for the unseen, translating the language of the soul into form. Their creative gifts are not only expressions of personal vision, but acts of emotional service to the world. As Cancer deepens into their spiritual power, they begin to integrate their connection to the moon with an understanding of the other planetary archetypes. The moon no longer acts in isolation but begins to harmonize with the energies of Saturn for emotional maturity, Neptune for spiritual sensitivity, Pluto for regenerative transformation, and Jupiter for emotional expansion. This cosmic integration creates a multidimensional awareness that allows Cancer to navigate complexity with wisdom. They become emotional strategists as much as emotional empaths. Their actions are infused with heart, but grounded in clarity. They begin to embody the divine paradox of softness and strength. They can cry and still be powerful. They can love deeply and still walk away. They can nurture others without losing themselves. They can hold space for pain without identifying with it. Their vulnerability becomes a tool for connection, not a weapon against themselves. Their heart becomes an engine for resilience. They recognize that feeling deeply is not the opposite of strength. It is its origin. Another dimension that unfolds in the awakened Cancer is their cosmic connection to cycles. Menstrual cycles, lunar phases, agricultural rhythms, tides, birth and death, endings and beginnings. They begin to live in accordance with the natural spiral of time, rather than forcing themselves into linear constructs. They understand that growth is not always upward, it is often inward, downward, circular. They become teachers of cyclical living, modeling how to honor rest, how to embrace emotional seasons, how to trust divine timing. Their lives become a living ritual. Their relationship with love transforms in extraordinary ways. No longer seeking to be needed as a substitute for being seen, they begin to choose relationships rooted in mutual healing, mutual care, and mutual spiritual evolution. They no longer chase security, they become it. They no longer fear abandonment, they recognize it as a redirection towards self-loyalty. Their love becomes conscious. It becomes magnetic. It becomes a force of renewal. They do not love to be loved. They love because it is their nature to radiate soul fire. Awakened Cancer becomes a portal. They open hearts just by being. They help others feel safe in their own emotions. They bring softness into places hardened by fear. They walk into rooms and transmute the energy. They help people remember parts of themselves they forgot. Their empathy is so profound it becomes catalytic. They do not force change, they invite it through presence. They become astrologically attuned. They begin to track lunar transits, eclipses, and emotional weather not from superstition but from embodied wisdom. They understand when to retreat and when to surge forward. They understand when to initiate and when to flow. They see the moon not just as a celestial body, but as a spiritual pulse that dances within them. They become part of the Earth's heartbeat. They become an oracle of timing, an intuitive channel of emotional truth, a guardian of the soul's sacred home. As Cancer steps fully into this multidimensional power, they realize they are not here merely to survive. They are here to bless, to guide, to create, to restore. Their presence is a medicine. Their energy is a safe harbor in stormy seas. Their legacy is not only felt in their accomplishments, but in the emotional liberation they inspire in others. Cancer, fully awakened, becomes the heartbeat of a new world. A world where emotion is sacred, where softness is not weakness, where healing is honored, where love leads, and in their rise the tides of humanity shift, one heart at a time. When Cancer awakens fully and embodies their celestial design, they begin to align their life with a rhythm that transcends the physical world. This sign, being ruled by the moon, operates from a level of instinct that is far more profound than mere logic. Once awake, Cancer does not just feel emotions. They become fluent in the divine language of energy. They understand that every person, space, and moment carries a vibration, and they learn to navigate this subtle world with the grace of an old soul. Their empathic gifts, once overwhelming, now serve as a sacred compass that leads them toward deeper purpose, greater service, and an unshakable inner peace. This awakening also reveals their immense power as emotional healers, not just for others but for the collective. Cancer holds within their emotional body the stories of humanity, its wounds, longings, and forgotten truths. As they awaken, they begin to heal these wounds not by fixing others, but by becoming a living example of what it means to feel fully and love freely without losing oneself. Their power is not loud or aggressive. It is magnetic and unforgettable. Their gaze becomes a mirror in which others see their own truth reflected. Their presence becomes a sanctuary for emotional honesty and radical acceptance. The world begins to turn differently around them, not because they force it to, but because their essence realigns those who come close to their energy field. Their connection to the divine feminine frequency, regardless of gender, becomes one of their most radiant expressions. Cancer becomes the vessel through which intuition, nurturing, creativity, and receptivity flow. This divine femininity is not passive. It is a force of creation and resurrection. Cancer learns to use this inner power to birth new realities. They don't just dream. They channel dreams into manifestation through intention, care, and consistent emotional alignment. They understand that true manifestation begins not in the mind, but in the heart space. They create from emotional clarity, from vibrational truth, from soulful presence. They become co-creators with the universe. In their awakening, Cancer begins to embody the sacred archetype of the cosmic mother or sacred caregiver, not in the limiting, self-sacrificial sense, but as a divine guardian of emotional intelligence. They become the protectors of the unseen, the nurturers of the vulnerable, the wisdom keepers of inner worlds. They honor the inner child in themselves and in others. They teach the world that softness is not submission. It is grace. That emotional vulnerability is not fragility. It is authenticity. That care is not weakness. It is spiritual strength. An awakened Cancer also learns how to wield solitude not as exile, but as sacred space. They begin to love their own company deeply, understanding that time spent alone is not time lost. It is time where the soul regenerates and receives messages from realms unseen. Their intuitive connection becomes sharper in silence. They enter a space of emotional self-sufficiency that allows them to give without depletion. They become rooted in themselves in a way that no external chaos can disturb. In this solitude, they build inner empires made of trust, peace, and remembrance. They also awaken the power of emotional legacy. Cancer begins to live not only for themselves, but for those who came before and those who will come after. They recognize that their healing work echoes backward and forward in time. Every time they break a pattern, they free not only themselves but those tied to the same emotional chains. Every act of self-love is a declaration that the pain of their ancestors will not be repeated. Every boundary they establish is a wall of protection built not from fear, but from ancestral wisdom. They become the living bridge between what was and what can be. As they continue to evolve, Cancer also awakens a fierce loyalty to their soul's mission. Once unclear or clouded by the needs of others, their path becomes illuminated by an internal knowing that cannot be ignored. They stop trying to blend in or conform, and instead, allow their uniqueness to lead the way. They embrace the truth that their sensitivity is not a limitation but a compass, pointing them toward their most authentic expression. Their purpose begins to reveal itself through the subtle threads of their daily emotional experience. They understand that the small, heartfelt choices shape the soul's journey more than grand gestures. Their relationship with time transforms. They no longer rush. They no longer cling to the past nor project into the future in fear. They live in alignment with divine timing, allowing each emotional moment to unfold with purpose. Their life becomes a reflection of lunar cycles. Not hurried, not delayed, but divinely timed. They begin to honor the natural tempo of their soul. They become deeply patient, not out of passivity, but out of trust. They know what is meant for them is already woven into the fabric of their becoming. As they become more rooted in their truth, Cancer also starts to awaken the healer in others. Simply by modeling what it looks like to live with emotional depth, honesty, and grace, they give others permission to do the same. Their very presence initiates others into their own healing journey. They are not teachers through instruction, they are teachers through embodiment. Their love is not conditional. It radiates from a place of wholeness, not need. It uplifts, it inspires, it restores faith in the goodness of the human heart. In this awakened state, Cancer's inner world becomes a universe of wisdom. They become deeply intuitive guides for others navigating emotional growth. Their words, once tentative, become poetic and powerful. They speak with the kind of truth that resonates beyond intellect. It lands in the heart. Their advice is rarely conventional, yet it often proves to be exactly what is needed. They see what others miss. They feel what others repress. And through this sacred sight, they help others find their own path to healing. As they reach higher states of emotional mastery, Cancer also becomes a vessel of joy. They laugh more freely, they love more openly, and they dance with life's rhythms with renewed faith. Their joy is not performative, it is sacred. It emerges from a place of emotional integration. They have faced the depths and returned with light. Their joy is the result of resilience, of sacred alignment, of knowing who they are in every phase of their becoming. They do not seek validation because their power comes from source, not approval. They do not fear loss because they understand the cyclical nature of all things. They do not cling to false security because they have found the true home within themselves. This is the power of an awakened Cancer. To hold space for others without losing themselves, to love without attachment, to lead with feeling and fire, and to walk through the world as a living testament that emotional truth is the highest form of strength. When Cancer reaches the height of their awakening, there is an even more subtle and sacred layer of transformation that begins to unfold, one that goes beyond personal healing and emotional wisdom and touches the field of collective evolution. Cancer becomes an anchor for emotional frequency on the earth plane, holding and stabilizing vibrations that are essential for humanity's return to empathy, unity, and remembrance. Their sensitivity becomes less about individual emotion and more about being attuned to the pulse of a changing world. They are no longer merely feeling for themselves. They are reading and translating the undercurrents of the collective unconscious, responding to the needs of the whole with deep spiritual intelligence. In this fully expanded state, Cancer starts to awaken the energies of sacred guardianship over the emotional body of the planet. Their alignment with the moon deepens into a multidimensional alliance with cosmic rhythms, earth energies, and divine feminine archetypes. Their soul begins to remember lifetimes of priestess work, of lunar rituals, of holding sacred circles where emotional truth was honored as divine. They become intuitively guided to create spaces of remembrance, whether through conversation, ritual, or simply their embodied presence. They no longer operate from emotional reactivity but from emotional sovereignty, where every wave of feeling becomes a current of creative power. As Cancer matures spiritually, they begin to recognize their role in transmuting the karma of emotional suppression within the human race. Through their embodiment, they challenge outdated narratives around strength and emotion. They begin to show through living example that softness is not to be feared, that grief is not to be avoided, that emotional depth is not chaos but clarity when held with love. Their journey teaches others how to stay present in discomfort without collapsing, how to alchemize fear into tenderness, and how to reclaim the inner realms as sacred territory rather than as a place to be fixed or escaped. In this evolved state, Cancer's connection to water becomes more conscious and ceremonial. They feel the oceans not only as physical bodies, but as mirrors of the emotional body of the earth. They begin to receive intuitive messages through rivers, rains, tides, and dreams. Their emotional guidance becomes intertwined with elemental wisdom. They understand that just as water moves and cleanses, so too must emotions be honored as divine movements of soul energy. They become keepers of the water element, protectors of emotional flow, and messengers of what needs to be felt in order to be healed. Cancer's relationship with lineage deepens as well. They start to walk not just as an individual, but as a living continuation of their bloodlines, carrying forward the unfulfilled prayers, gifts, and dreams of their ancestors. They begin to sense when emotional patterns have been inherited, and they no longer carry them unconsciously. They perform the sacred work of emotional disentanglement and liberation, freeing themselves from cycles that were never theirs to begin with. Their healing becomes intergenerational. Their voice becomes a conduit for truths that were once silenced. Their heart becomes a sanctuary where ancestral pain is finally met with compassion and given permission to transform into wisdom. They also awaken a powerful mystical sense of timing, guided by the lunar cycle not only in daily life but in life transitions and soul evolution. They begin to move with the dark moon and full moon as portals for shedding and illumination, integrating these phases into their inner world. They plant intentions, release attachments, cleanse their aura, and renew their heart in harmony with the cosmic clock. Time becomes sacred to them. Seasons are not measured in months but in waves of emotional evolution. They begin to track their own healing journey in spirals, not lines, and in doing so, they reclaim the ancient wisdom of living in harmony with the lunar soul. There is also an emergence of profound creative capacity that activates in their fully awakened state. Cancer begins to write, sing, dance, or express themselves through mediums that translate emotion into form. Their art becomes a form of emotional alchemy. Their words open portals in others. Their stories heal shame. Their creativity is not about performance or perfection. It is about transmitting truth through beauty, releasing the unspoken into the light. They become sacred artists, weaving emotional truth into form in a way that touches the unconscious of others and activates their own healing. Awakened Cancer also redefines love in spiritual terms. They begin to view love not as something to obtain or control, but as the fundamental frequency they are here to embody. They become deeply connected to divine love, unconditional and boundless. Their relationships no longer revolve around emotional validation but evolve into soul partnerships, where growth, authenticity, and mutual liberation are the guiding principles. They magnetize people into their lives who are ready to meet them in wholeness. They become channels of a new kind of intimacy, one that is transparent, spiritually aligned, and rooted in truth rather than fear. Their intuition evolves into a more refined claircognizance, allowing them to receive instantaneous knowing from the emotional and spiritual realms. They become deeply in tune with energy shifts in people, spaces, and even timelines. This intuitive intelligence becomes second nature, guiding them toward decisions that serve their highest self and those around them. They become energetic architects, able to read the emotional blueprint of situations and respond with precision and grace. In their fullness, Cancer becomes a sacred leader of the emotional evolution of humanity. They are not always seen on stage or in the spotlight, but their influence is undeniable. They change lives through connection. They rebuild families through healing. They restore the feminine principle of care to communities that have forgotten the soul. They are emotional shamans, guiding others through inner waters with the steady hand of someone who has swum through their own depths. Their wisdom is quiet but eternal. Their love is gentle but revolutionary. Their essence is nurturing, and yet their presence is transformative. They become a mirror of the moon herself, ever-changing, ever-present, illuminating the dark with a subtle glow, pulling the tides of the world with silent power. They embody mystery and wisdom, stillness and movement, love and boundaries. They are no longer afraid of their own intensity. They are no longer diminished by a world that once feared their truth. They know who they are. They remember why they came. And in their remembrance, they awaken others. In this state, Cancer does not seek to escape the world. They seek to soften it, to heal it, to reweave it with care. They become the balm to wounds unspoken, the warmth in a cold reality, the mothering presence that the world has long forgotten. They do this not by effort but by embodiment. They become home in human form, a place where souls come to rest, to be held, to be seen, and to rise.